Perfect. Okay. Let's see. It's June 4th. This is Pulp Demo. I'm Grant Gainey. I'm going to do a quick description of the current state of getting a v4 version of the Pulp API in place. That's what I have been working on recently. First of all, can everybody read the screen that I'm sharing?
I can see it.
All right, cool. All right, this is the screen is my development environment where things are up and running and have littered with debug statements. It's not quite ready to check in. But the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab, as you can see, the api.json from the Pulp v3 API, and put that in a file. And then, come here, you. I'm going to do the same thing. And you'll note that in this GET request, I'm getting it from v4. Come on, there we go. So you can see there's two files. And the goal with v4 is that it's exactly like v3. It exists in parallel with v3. It has a few underlying changes in the serialization, but the API has not changed. So I'm going to diff our two API JSONs, and there's a lot here, but as you can see, the difference is only that one of them says it's v3 and one of them says it's v4, and all of the API exists in v4 without a problem. One of the things I also did to make my life easier here is we do using the Pulp CLI here, we do a status check. As you can see, it's working. You know, all the status that you've come to know and love. If, however, I tell CLI, I would like to use a different version of Pulp. So I want to talk to API version v4. I'm going to run the status command. Looks really similar. At the top of the status output for v4, the status output has been modified to tell you which version you're talking to. v3, we don't change anything. For v4, and later we're going to show you what version we're talking to. As you can see, I've got debug. You'll see debug statements all over the place. I have to do some cleanup before I get this checked in. But the cool thing, at least from my point of view, is that with very little change, in fact, you'll note that I'm using API version v4 to use the CLI. You'll note that the href that is returned from that call says, hey, this is a v4 API created remote, and all of the things that you would expect here. So I'm going to create a remote. I'm going to create a repository using v4. I'm going to sync that repository. Lots of debug output. Says everything is fine. I am going to then grab the task. Again, you can see this is a v4 href. Show the task. Tasks, not always. We'll get to why. Tasks know which version of the API was used to create them, which can be important if a task, once it finally gets picked up by a worker, wants to do things that are version specific. So this has been added to the task object, and it's persisted with the task so that when the task is picked up by the worker, it knows how it was created. That's not always the case, and I'll explain why in a little bit. Anyway, so you can see a bunch of v4 stuff working. Now, if I do just show me my repositories, and I'm not going to tell CLI which version to use, so it defaults to v3, and it's going to give you a v3 API, v3 href rather, because that's the way you asked for that object. If I do the exact same thing, oh, come here, you. I'm having trouble copying and pasting this morning. Again, I'm going to ask it for v4, the same call, and it's going to return you v4 hrefs. One of the major milestones that I hit earlier this week, which means I'm now considering that we're ready to check in this as a tech preview into main, is the state of the CI. So in the windows on the left here, here's me having run the full Pulp core functional test suite. And let me do this. You can see better. Oh no, we've got a failure. What happened here? Well, it turns out that this is because my OCI environment configuration is a little wrong. And so when it goes to look up storage, it's looking in the wrong place. That is an environmental problem. Otherwise, this is the test suite running, and I have made 0 changes to our test suite because that's what our users expect. So whatever worked before this fix is going to continue to work after this PR gets merged. Similarly, here's pulp file. And again, there's one failure here, which is, I believe, yeah, that I've got a setting. There's a setting that's incorrect that causes this test to fail. Otherwise, 103 passed tests. And then at the bottom here, pulp RPM, and you can see all but one pass here. And this one is because I don't have SHA-1 turned on in my OCI environment. So that particular test fails. So basically, other than environmental problems, core file and RPM functional tests all run successfully in my environment. So what state are we in right now? What did this take? We are currently, Pulp is using URL namespacing in Django. And the main change here is that where we used to have v3 hard coded, we now have a slug that says version. Django Magic says if you've got that, then I will pass in whatever is in the place of this slug into the views so they can know what version they were invoked by. The only difficulty with that, and the most intrusive change that had to be made for this, is in every view set, every command has to accept keyword arguments, and many of ours do, but not all of them, because that's how the REST framework passes the version information to the view set, is via a keyword argument version. That isn't visible. That change is not visible outside. In other words, it doesn't change the API.json. It doesn't change the way you would invoke the URLs directly. So it only affects our code, but it is pretty intrusive. If I can figure out a way to intercept that, that would be great, because it would make it a lot easier to push this without having to update the plugins at all. But right now we do have to do some coordination there before this can get merged. I'm trying to right now if you use the v4 API.json to generate the bindings, it generates the bindings with different class names. And I'm trying to not do that because it would mean that it would be a lot easier for users using the bindings to just switch to v4. So that's a thing that I'm investigating right now. And the last one is that I've got the infrastructure in place, as I mentioned, so the tasks can know the version of the API that was used to create them. However, in instances where tasks are being created not directly from the API, which happens in a wide variety of ways, the only way to get that information to the task is to make it something that is accessible to the dispatch call. And that requires touching essentially every dispatch destination to accept the keyword argument version, or at least to accept keyword arguments in general. Many of our tasks do, but not all of them, again. So anyway, that's the current state of things. It's up, it's running, it's usable. The active API, the web API for talking to API, that all works as well. All the tests pass other than the environmental ones that I've shown here. And I've got the changes necessary so that CLI will be able to talk to different versions of Pulp. That'll get merged at the same time. So that's where I am currently. And does anybody have any questions? Okay.
So
Andrew.
the
Oh, go ahead, Daniel.
so the slug change that you made,
Yes.
that then I would assume makes it independent, such that if you turn off the v3 API entirely, the v4 API keeps working.
Yeah, the rather than try and get to the right code here, I'm going to try and describe this out loud. So the slug is less than version greater than. Oh, and this is a thing that I forgot to mention. One of the things I am working with, investigating, struggling with a bit here is the way that works in a vanilla Django application is you can, for example, um, have that slug be a regular expression, which is the version and then the list of strings that you will accept for that version. So like for right now, it would be, version and v3 or v4. One of the things that I struggled with a lot on this is we do a fair amount of manipulation of the URL patterns kind of after the fact in the Open API init call, in URLs, in reverse, and I have not yet gotten that regular expression to be to get passed through all of the stuff we do to URL patterns. Like, let me give you an example here. I'm just going to grab this file remote href that you can see here, and I'm going to just grab this. Now, right now you can see, hey, that's a v4 API. Let's make it, I don't know, let's make it a v6 API. It just works. And it says, hey, v6 is implemented, because right now I'm not restricting what you're allowed to put in this slug, and it needs to be restricted. What I've got in the settings is a default API version, which is currently going to be v3, right? That's the default so far, and allowed versions, which is a list, and right now that's v3, v4. And I need to be able to take advantage of those in the context of this slug in order to show which versions are available. Part of that is adding that information to the status output so that things like CLI can ask Pulp, what API versions do you currently support of a given instance, and be able to make decisions based on that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay, cool. Cool. And there is, I've got it right now in my environment, I have it commented out, but there is are you going to turn v4 on at all? That I want to have interact with those, because at least until we're ready to turn off the tech preview, this needs to be an option that users can turn on and then decide, you know what, I don't want to expose v4, and turn it off again without having to go in and edit urls.py. Other questions? Okay, Andrew, can we stop the recording, please?